Hello and welcome to the Addicts podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today is episode 89, and we're going to be interviewing Rex S. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So, like I always say, let's get the party started and dive in. Tell us about growing up. How was your childhood?
Um, my childhood was shit. Uh, uh,
Tell us how
my
you really feel.
my earliest childhood memory is Christmas 1979. I was 5 years old. It was Christmas Eve, actually. And we had this tradition in our family. My mom kept it going after the divorce and everything. But in my neighborhood, different families made different meals, and then like all the families, like all the kids' families, went around to the different houses and sampled everything, and it was just like real social. There was probably like 6 or 7 houses that participated, and my mom didn't drink at all. Like she's the kind of person who would have like a couple sips of wine and tell, "Oh, I'm getting sleepy. I better put it down."
Yeah.
And I remember her drinking brandy. She was drinking brandy that night. And so I'm just going to relate to the story as it was. The blanks were filled in for me. So my mom's drinking because my dad's supposed to be home, and she knows that he's at his mistress's house. And the phone rings. My mom answers it, and it's his other woman saying, "Hey, Ed forgot his wallet here."
Oh, God.
Yeah. So my mom tells my sister Rita to go get her gun. She's like, "Go get your dad's gun."
Oh, my God.
So Rita goes upstairs, gets a gun, brings it downstairs. My dad walks in the front. I'm sitting on the couch watching, like, I don't know, Frosty or whatever, right? And my dad opens the front door, and my mom just puts 6 in his chest. Boom, 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 boom. And or point blank, he goes backing out the door. Then like 2 seconds later, he comes flying in the door, and he smacks the gun out of her hand and like pins her to the wall. And somebody called the cops. The cops end up coming. So it turns out when my mom sent my sister upstairs to get the gun, my dad was head groundsman of Glassboro State College in South Jersey, where I'm from. And he did track and field events. It was his starter pistol.
Oh, thank God.
Blank. So she did it to appease my mom, knowing that my mom couldn't hurt him. You know what I'm saying? So you got to remember, this is 1970, small town New Jersey, South Jersey. The cops come, and they're like, "Are you good? Are you good? Everybody's good. We're out of here." And I remember sitting on the stairs thinking to myself, like, "Man, is Christmas ruined?" You know what I mean? And my dad comes around the corner to go up the stairs. I'm like, "Dad, is Santa still coming?" He's like, "I shot that fat bastard. He's bleeding out in the yard."
Oh, God.
So fast forward a few weeks, because my birthday's in the middle of January. I spent my 6th birthday sitting in a courtroom with my dad.
Oh,
And
no.
we're there all day. We go to lunch, come back, spend the afternoon. Finally, at the end of the day, the judge calls my dad up, and he's like, "Well, Mr. Walter," he was like, "it looks like he's not going to show. So I approve the adoption. You're granted custody, blah, 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 till."
What were you in court for exactly?
So on the drive home, that's what I asked my dad. I'm like, "Dad,
Okay.
and he's like, "Well," he was like, "I'm not your real father." He was like, "I'm actually your real mother's father. So I'm actually your grandfather on your mother's side. Your parents didn't want you when you were 4 years old. So your mom and I went and got you, and we adopted you. And it was made legal today because your dad was supposed to, your real father, who's been in prison for the last 6 years for armed robbery and possession of cocaine, doesn't want you. So now I'm stuck with you." Okay, boom. That's my 6th birthday. About a week later, my dad's like, he's like, "Hey, if you had to choose who you were going to live with, me or your mom, who would you choose?" And I'm like thinking to myself, like, this ain't a real question, right? You know what I mean? Like, this is a silly question. This is like one of those kind of questions that kids, like, how much would you eat? How much would you get paid to eat a bug? Things like that. That's, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm thinking. So I weigh the options. My mom makes me clean. She makes me take baths. She makes me do chores, and my dad takes me fishing. He plays Chinese checkers with me. You know what I mean? So I'm like, about 2 weeks later, we moved in with the woman who was his mistress, who would become my future stepmom, and who would be my abuse her for the next 6 years. About 2 weeks after we moved in with her, this is about second or third week of February 1980. I don't know what I did. I don't ever really know what I did, but she started beating me with this like unbreakable plastic soup ladle. And I remember coming to awareness with my head like that, and just crunched down in the corner of the couch, trying to protect the back of my head. And my younger future stepbrother, is screaming at her to stop. And she kind of comes to awareness, realizes what she's done. My head's bleeding everywhere. She drags me to the bathroom, sticks my head under the faucet in the tub, try to get the bleeding to stop. It won't stop. So she tells me, she's like, "We're going to tell your dad you slipped in the kitchen on the wax floor and hit your head on the dishwasher." So that's what I told him. On the way to the hospital, she pulls over in this little dirt parking lot. She stops the car and she looks me dead in the eye. And she says, "If you ever tell anyone the things that go on in our house, I'll kill your dad." She was like, "You may get away and I may go to prison, but you'll have to live the rest of your life knowing that I killed your dad because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." So I kept my mouth shut. We got to the hospital. Several nurses kept asking me, they're like, "What happened? What happened?" And I kept telling them I slipped in the kitchen. I was running through the kitchen in my socks. I slipped, hit my back of my head on the dishwasher. So finally the doctor comes in and he was like, "You want to tell me what happened?" He tells her to leave. And she's like, "I'm not leaving." He's like, "You're not his guardian. You're nothing." He was like, "Right now," he was like, "you're under suspicion." He's like, "You need to leave." So she left the room and I'm sitting there and, crying. And he asked me, he looks me in the eye and he's like, "Son, you want to tell me what really happened?" And I just so I remember just sitting there thinking I can't say anything. I was like, "I slipped in the kitchen, hit my head on the dishwasher."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Well, if that's your story, there's nothing I can do for you. You're on your own." Stitched up my head and watched me walk out with the woman that he knew did that to me. So I learned at a real young age that nobody had my back. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was coming to rescue me. And the physical abuse turned into sexual abuse. She would take things and stick them up my butt, take rubber bands and use them to hit me in the nuts. My two older stepbrothers started visiting my room late at night, getting me to go down on them. That went on for about 3 years until I pulled a knife on one of them, told them if I saw it again, I was going to cut it off. Might not be in that moment, but someday I was going to cut that fucker off. They must have believed me because they never came back. The physical abuse stayed until I was about 12 years old. And right after my 12th birthday, I was at my friend Miles's house, and we were kicking it with his older brother or his uncle was hanging out with my older brother, and they were doing coke. And we talked him into fucking getting us high, and they shot us up. And that was the first time I ever got really high. First time I ever smoked. I smoked weed and drank beer and whatever I could get my hands on from the time I was 6 years old.
How old were you guys at that time?
12.
Oh.
12 years. 1980.
What did you get your hands on?
Cocaine.
At 12, no shit.
Yeah. And about February or March of 1986, something happened. I remember it wasn't too cold out, so it might even have been like April. But I was messing around with my stepbrother, and I think we were sword fighting with wiffle ball bats, and I think I hit him too hard. I probably hit him too hard, and he went crying in my downstairs in the basement. Downstairs in the basement was my dad's workshop. Him and my stepmom made you ever seen those wooden duck or geese weather vanes that the wings spin and it turns in the wind, or they have reindeer plant holders with poinsettias in them and stuff like that. So they did stuff like that. They made little wooden trucks and stuff, and they sold it at arts crafts fairs around the holidays. So their workshop was downstairs, a lot of scrap wood laying around, stuff like that. So she comes flying up the stairs. She's got about a baseball bat length piece of 2x2, and she's got it cocked back like she's about to swing for the fences. And I remember time slowed down. And I remember thinking to myself, like hearing this voice in my head, thinking, if you don't put a stop to this, she's going to kill you. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but at some point she's going to kill you. And I made the decision to stand up for myself, and time just like, I put my arm up. She hit me in the arm, broke my arm, and I hit her, and then I blacked out. And next thing I remember is my dad pulling me off of her, and then he hit me and knocked me out. I remember him hitting me. Well, I remember seeing the fist coming. I'll never forget that. And I woke up in juvie. No charges were pressed. I sat there for, I don't think I spent 2 nights. But I demolished the side of her face. She had that reconstructive surgery. I never really found out why no charges were pressed or anything. But I think it had something to do with, my dad used to work for the police in my hometown. He did private investigation work and stuff. So I think he might have pulled some strings to keep me from getting in trouble. But got back to the house, and there was an army duffel bag packed with a bunch of my clothes and a bunch of my cassette tapes, my Walkman, and they said, my dad said, get the fuck out of my house, don't ever come back. And we argued a little bit. I just told him, I said, are you sure this is what you want? And he said, you heard me, get out of my house, don't ever fucking come back. So I left. And to my knowledge, except for maybe during the Depression, I was the first homeless person in my hometown, Glassboro, New Jersey. But nobody, like, people knew. Well, nobody knew then. At that point, I was staying with a friend of mine whose mom was super cool. One of the things my stepmom used to do to abuse me was she would send me to elementary school with like my older stepbrother's old clothes, and they're like 10 years older than me. So like these are clothes from like the mid 70s, and she's sending me to school in them in the mid 80s. Like, you know what I mean? And so I used to go over to my friend Miles's house every morning and borrow some of his clothes and wear his clothes to school, and then come home and change back. His mom was cool. She knew what was up. But like, you got to remember, this is small town New Jersey in the 1980s. You know what I mean? People didn't butt in. They just did what they could in other ways. You know what I'm saying? So like, she knew for the longest time that I was living in Miles's closet. She never said anything until finally she did. And she was like, you don't have to sleep in the closet, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, but about a month after I got kicked out, me and Miles were in Camden, New Jersey at about 2:00 in the morning. We were looking for some Coke. I had come up on $20. Back then you could get 5 nickel bags for $20. And so we wanted to get high again. And running this old black guy, and he's like, what the fuck are you doing out here? Now, you gotta understand, man, Camden is like Detroit, New Jersey.
Oh, I know. I was gonna mention, I'm from New Jersey. I'm in Middlesex County. I'm from Central Jersey.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up. Right on. Represent.
So yeah, I know all about it.
Yeah. So the people who don't know, Camden's like Detroit or like Flint.
Exactly. You don't want to be caught there at the wrong time.
No, especially in the 80s. Like, it's cleaned up a lot now. Like,
you go down,
like they got the riverfront walk and stuff now. It's crazy. Like back then, that was like crackheads and hookers. That's all the riverfront was.
Yeah.
But he's like, man, he's like, come on, man, back to my house. I can get you off the street. So we go back to his house, and he's like, what you looking for? And I said, white. I didn't know no different, you know what I mean? And he hands me this little wax spindle with this little bit of powder in the corner. And I told him, I said, I'm young, but I'm not stupid, bro. I was like, I know there's supposed to be more than that. He's like, what you talking about, man? He's like, that shit ain't pinch. He gets all defensive and shit. And I was like, bro, dude, I'm used to getting bags like this, you know, like the size of my thumbnail, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
he's like, man, what you looking for? I was like, Coke. He's like, nah. He's like, that's heroin. Heroin. He's like, yeah. He's like, heroin. And Miles was like, oh no. And I was like, oh. I was like, tell me more about this. And eventually I asked him, I said, man, why you call it heroin? He said, because once you do it, you hook from here on out. And I was like, yeah, I can dig that. I did dope a few more times over the next year. What?
So you actually thought about knowing that you're going to get addicted to this right away, and you still did it?
Yeah, I didn't give a fuck. My brother was an addict.
like me, when I started doing it, I didn't realize, you know what I mean? I never thought for so long, I didn't think I was an addict.
Not me.
I just partied, quote unquote.
I knew. I knew what road I was headed down. Plus, like, you have to understand, like, part of the abuse that I sustained was a lot of psychological. So, like, I was told by my stepmom, but see, I got a lot of psychological abuse from my dad too. My dad claimed to have not known that the abuse was going on, which she never did it around him. And like, she was good about it. She had this like white pages phone book and this little baseball bat that she would like hold on my back, hit the phone so that it wouldn't leave marks, but still hurt like a motherfucker. Yeah, she was good. She knew what she was doing. And but I forgot what I was saying.
About her hitting you, and she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, hang on a second, give me a second.
That's all right. It happens to me all the time.
Yeah, anyway, I knew I was. That's what I was gonna say. They used to tell me you're gonna be a junkie convict, just like your real father. Just ain't gonna be nothing but a dropout junkie convict, just like your real father. You know, and like, so hearing that for 6 years, you know what I mean? You're fat, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're dumb. You know, the stupid. I never bought into that one. I knew better than that. Like, I taught myself how to read it. Like 3 years old with one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. My older sister helped me learn how to read. Like, I did a book report on Animal Farm in the 4th grade by George Orwell. You know what I mean? Like, I knew I wasn't stupid. So that's like the one thing I focused on. But my older brother was an addict. My real father was an addict. As far as I knew, my real mom was an alcoholic. I kind of knew that. But here's the thing, though. I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. I was raised Catholic-ish. You know, I got confirmed and all that. Then as soon as my mom told me, she said, go to your confirmation and you can make your own decision. I said, all right. I quit going the next week. But but that shit don't go away, man. So suicide, gone. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how low it got. That's why I would like, you know, that's why when I found heroin, I was like, oh, I don't have to kill myself. There's this beautiful place that I can go to and forget everything and all my problems. And even if it's just for a short period of time, it's a wonderful thing. I used to call it the land of Nod, going off to the land of Nod. And, you know, I messed around, like I said, for maybe a dozen times over the next year. Summer '87, I started selling crack. I'd go over to Philly and I'd get little $2 caps.
How old were you at that time?
13. And
no shit.
I knew these Simon City Royals, these white gangster disciples in Philly who sold, you could get 6 $2 crack hits with the little cap and the little plastic vial for $10. And it cost 80 cents to ride the bus from Camden to Philly over to Ben Franklin. So I'd hustle up $15. I'd take the bus over, boom, go score 6 of them, take the bus back, get a 3-pack of soft pretzels for $1, take the bus back, and then go sell those for $5 a piece in Camden. And I do this all day, back and forth, do about 5-6 trips. And then I'd go over to Philly, over off Lombard, and in South Philly. And there was this like total roach motel above this like donut shop that pay by the night, pay by the hour, pay by the week. It was $15 a night. And I started staying there. And there was a bunch of transvestite hookers that lived there. And they used to always get me and Miles to do stuff, try to get us to do stuff. You know, like there was all these creepy old men who wanted to do stuff to us and stuff. But we were all like, nah, I'm a hustler. You know what I mean? Like I'm all right selling drugs. I'm good at that. And it's probably like, I think it was like July. But it was a Friday night. Miles went back to his house, and I stayed, knocked at the door, and this one real aggressive tranny was like, hey, come on, dude, just wants to fucking pay you to have you walk around naked. No, I'm like, no, I told you fucking no. And boom, they kicked in the door, and I don't remember anything else. I don't even really remember that too much. That might even be constructed memory just from the event. But Miles found me the next morning. I was bleeding out from my ass, and I had a broken jaw. My eye was swollen shut. They beat me and left me for dead. And who knows how many times they raped me. But I ended up in the hospital under a fake name. I gave a fake name, and there was this woman, her name's Linda. She was like my street mom back then. She was my earliest heroin connect.
Okay.
And Miles called her, and fucking she pretended to be my mom and came and got me out of the hospital as soon as they would let me leave. And so after that, I kind of backed off the heroin for a while because I was afraid of where it was leading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just decided to explore my alcoholism for the most part, and did a lot of cocaine.
And at this age, at this point, I should say, you're still very young.
Yeah. Everything is pretty much the same from about 13 to 16. I played sports, and I was on track to get a scholarship my senior year. So
Yeah.
I kind of got my shit together. I stopped doing all hard drugs. I just drank and smoked pot. Like back then, like pot was really hard to come by.
Really?
Yeah, really hard. Like, and like it was always like some like Virginia or Kentucky homegrown shit. Like it was really bad. But I had this one guy who I met him in high school, and we did heroin a couple times together. And he was like, "Hey man," he was like, "I'll help you get off the heroin." He's like, "You don't ever have to worry about finding weed again." He's like, "I'll always make sure you got weed." So that was cool. He helped me get off heroin. And I got in a motorcycle accident the summer.
So you technically use weed medicinally to get yourself off heroin.
Yeah, I've done that.
I don't think people appreciate how, the power of using that stuff. I'm for plant-based recovery and stuff like that. Not specifically for recovery, but all things, they could really help.
I'll just put that out there right now. I've been clean for 8.5 years. I was on probation when I got clean, and I ended up doing the first 4.5 years in jail. As soon as I got out of jail, I was on painkillers because I had degenerative disc disease in my back, and I have arthritis. I was on psych meds because I suffer from depression and stuff. I was on all these pills, and I told my parole officer, I said, "Hey, I'm getting off the pills and I'm going to smoke weed." I was like, "You need to figure it out." And for the last 4 years, I've used marijuana medicinally, and I also am plant-based. I believe that there is a lot of healing power in psychedelics. I do vision quests and things like that. But yeah, so just put that out there.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, and it's funny because like people will judge you about that. And like they'll be judging you with a cigarette in one hand and an energy drink in the other.
Exactly. It's all drugs. It's all drugs.
Sugar.
I think you know what I noticed when people mention what they're addicted to, and they say drugs, they say, "Oh, I'm addicted to painkillers, I'm addicted to this." No one ever mentions I'm addicted to cigarettes, because that kills you. It kills you also. It's just a longer, slower process. That's it.
There's no chemicals that we willingly put into our body for recreation, like for enjoyment, that we don't have a off switch in our brain for. Cocaine and sugar. Sugar is the number one addiction on the planet.
Yeah.
More than alcohol, more than nicotine, more than heroin. I mean, sugar is it because they put sugar in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's funny you mentioned it. I got this Gatorade with 0 sugar in it.
Yeah. I know I'm an energy drinker. I get the sugar-free ones. But anyway, summer after my senior year, a couple weeks before the start of the academic school year at Rutgers, I was in a motorcycle accident. I broke 27 bones. I was in a coma for 73 days. I flatlined 3 times en route to the ER. I was in an accident in Camden, and they flight for life me to University of Pennsylvania Trauma Center. And back then, if you were in a flight for life and you flatlined, they had to land the helicopter. They landed 3 times going from Camden to Philly.
Well, so Flight for Life, is that program where people volunteer as pilots?
I don't know. Flight for Life is the one where like if they bring in a helicopter, that's Flight for Life.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a program where some people volunteer to actually fly those helicopters. They call it something. I forget.
That might be. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But I spent 73 days in a coma. I broke my collarbone. I had a compound fracture on my shin, cracked my femur. They say that where I landed on my head, they found me 175 feet from the point of impact. So they theorized, nobody saw it. They theorized because I was on the back of the bike and I was wearing the driver's helmet. They think that I was ejected off the back of the bike, landed on my head, and then my left side like hit the ground. And then I rolled into the bush where some people who were at the party, coming from the party that we were headed to, were coming to see what all the lights and stuff were about. They saw my Doc Martin sticking out of the bush. Huh. But I spent another 8.5 weeks total in traction.
What's that mean in traction?
Traction, like, is when they have like the ropes and stuff holding you up, like the pulleys and stuff. The people who are laying.
So for rehab, so you were learning how to move your arms again, basically.
Well, no, that's to hold you in place. Like they use different pulleys and stuff to hold you in place so your bones heal properly. Like I couldn't move. I was suspended. I was laying on straps, and like I had a cast from my top of my left shoulder down to my left wrist. I had reconstructive surgery on my hand. My collarbone was broke. I broke my neck in 3 places and my lower spine in 3 places. I had a halo brace on, which is that one that they drill into your head for a neck break. So you can't move, but they can only brace it on one side because my left collarbone was broken. So they couldn't put the brace on my left shoulder. It was bad. They thought I was paralyzed from the waist down because I had been laying in the same position for so long that my something put pressure on something, so I had no sensation in my legs. But that came back because like once you come out of the cast, they start moving you to rehab you, and once they started moving, the sensation started coming back, and then it came back more once I started.
Going back to the coma, did you hear anything while you were in the coma?
You know, I didn't wake up with any memory, and I really, 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 really wanted to. Like
when you woke up, was it like, oh, I'm waking up from sleep, or?
Yeah, I was really dry. Like my lips felt really chapped. My mouth was like super, super dry. And I just remember like waking up and there's a mirror above me. So when you're in traction and you're suspended, they either put a mirror below you if you're face down or one above you so that you can talk to the people that are next to you.
Okay.
Like they make eye contact because I couldn't move my head. You remember I had a broken neck, so I couldn't move my head. So like I woke up and like, I don't know, I just knew something bad had happened, but I couldn't remember. Actually, I think one of the first things I thought was that I overdosed. Like I remember thinking, did I overdose? And then I saw all the ropes and everything. I was like, okay. And then I started thinking like, fuck, maybe I got hit by a car. Then my girlfriend was there. She was reading the Bible. I was awake probably listening to her for like a good 60, 70 seconds before like I grunted or whatever. And I don't really remember a whole lot about it, but I remember not being freaked out. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, what the fuck? Where am I? Like I was like, okay, I'm in the hospital. I know about hospitals. I've been in a lot of hospitals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got out of the hospital, turned 18, jumped on the first settlement check that they offered. After lawyer fees and everything, my Uncle Ted was my lawyer. After paying him, I got a cashier's check, which I signed it and gave it right back to him. I just wanted to hold it for $350,000 and change. And so I went and told my girlfriend, and I was like, hey, anything you want to do that we can drive to tomorrow night, let's go do it. And she was like, I want to go see the Grateful Dead in Philly. And I was like, man, but that, because back then I was like super like punk rock, headbanger, Like I was into like Dead Kennedys and Ministry and Butthole Surfers, like industrial. I was not into some fucking old hippie country band who fucking were a bunch of burnout acid heads. And because I had never eaten acid at that point. I was afraid of it because me and Miles scored a vial of acid when we were like 15. And it was in a Visine bottle. And his mom found it and put some in her eyes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we came home and she had really, really long hair. She was like sitting there like one or two strands at a time burning her hair.
Oh,
She, it's so pretty. It's so pretty. She burned half her hair off.
oh my God.
Yeah, so like I was like, I'm never fucking eating that shit ever. Like, no way. But so I kept my word, took her to the show, we bought tickets, and we're walking around the lot, and I'm just like, dude, this is crazy. This is insane. And then we come across this bus, this big old 1942 silver International Harvester school bus. And there's all these punk rock kids sitting on this blanket outside of it, like mohawks and shit. And I'm like, they're like, hey, what's up, brother? I was like, hey, what's up? I was like, man, you guys are into this shit? They're like, hell yeah, bro. Like, this is the life. I was like, man. I was like, that's crazy, bro. And like, so they're like, are you going to the show? I was like, yeah. They're like, sit down, sit down. You want to smoke some pot? I was like, yeah. They handed me a pipe, and it was the first time I'd ever smoked kind bud. And
good stuff.
I took it, and I looked at it, and I felt it immediately. Like I was immediately stoned. I was like, oh my God. I was like, dude, what is this laced with? He's like, weed. He's like, it's just good California weed, bro. And I was like, oh my God. So they gave us a bag of mushrooms to send us in the show. And the first song they played was the only song I knew, Touch of Grey, because it was on MTV. And that was the first song they played. And like the mushrooms had already kicked in. Steve Miller opened up for him. I love Steve Miller, man. And so the mushrooms had already kicked in. So by the time they came on and played Touch of Grey, I was like, what? Boom. Brain melted. I was hooked, bro. After the show, we all met back up, and they're like, hey man, fucking, you guys should hang out. So we hung out for the couple days of the show. And then dude's like, man, what are you guys doing? I'm like, nothing. I was like, nothing at all. I was like, the school year's done. I was like, we got no plans. I was like, why? What's up? They're like, man, you should come on tour with us for a couple weeks. And I was like, bet, let's go. And she's like, oh, I don't know. So I was
tour with Following the Dead, or playing musician or something?
No, just following. Just go. Just
Following the Dead.
Yeah, yep. And so like she didn't want to go. So I was like, well, I guess that means I don't want to go. And so he hands me this business card, and on it says 1-900-RUN-DEAD. And that used to be a hotline that you could call, and it would tell you where like the next few shows were in what city on what dates.
Really?
Yeah.
The Dead had their own hotline.
Yeah.
Funny.
It was the coolest thing ever. And so they were playing Wisconsin. And I just jumped on a bus, set up a system with my uncle. I said, hey, I'm going. He was stoked about it. My uncle's like the total black sheep of the family. He's like total millionaire lawyer who did nothing but hookers, drugs, and booze. And they made apologies for his life. He was just a cigar smoking, scotch drinking, whatever. And
stereotypical lawyer.
Yeah. And he was like, man, dude, go have fun. He's like, stay gone as long as you want. He was like, you want to make me happy? Don't ever come back. So I did. I left. And we set up a system where if I called him, I'd tell him what next city I was in, and he'd tell me what hotel to pick up my money, because he would wire me money.
Okay,
and
that's good.
Yeah, and I just went on a Dead tour for
that's amazing.
Like 6 months, 7 months, and then I decided that I wanted to meet my biological father. So I ended up going to Vegas. I found out that's where he was, and first night I met him, he was like, so you like cocaine? I was like, yeah, I used to. He's like, have you ever done meth? He's always like, have you ever done crank? And I was like, no. I was like, they don't have that back where we're from. And he was like, man, you should try it with me. So dude, my first time I met my real father, he smoked an 8-ball of meth with me and his best friend. And then he stole all my money a couple days later when I finally went to sleep. And I spent the next 10, 11 months in Vegas strung out on meth till I had a paranoid delusion I was up for like 31 days, hadn't slept. And I was at a friend's house and I thought the cops were raiding the house. I saw them raiding the house. They called me by name, told me to come outside with my hands on top of my head. When I did, two cops ran up and slammed me on the ground. When I hit the ground and looked up, there was no cops anywhere. So I immediately went inside, packed a backpack full of clean socks and underwear, stuck a bag of weed in the bottom, wrote a note, taped it to the TV, said, because I was living with a woman, everybody called her Aunt Carolyn. I was like, Aunt Carolyn, gotta go. Love you. Immediately walked to I-15 and started hitchhiking north. And I started to pass out. Like my body started to shut down. My body started to realize, catch up. Like, oh, hey, you've been up for a fucking month. Like, you need to sleep. I made it to a cardboard dumpster outside this A&PM on the outskirts of North Las Vegas, right by the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. And I crawled into the cardboard dumpster and slept for 3 days. And when I finally woke up and went inside and asked dudes if I could use the bathroom, they were like, hey, man, we kept coming and checking on you, making sure you weren't dead. And I hitchhiked, ended up hitchhiking north, made it to Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City, I run into these kids.
This is Salt Lake City in Jersey, or are you talking about Utah?
Utah, yeah.
Okay.
I hitchhiked north from Las Vegas to
Gotcha.
to Salt Lake City, Utah. And when I got there, I ran into these kids. They're talking and we're talking, and they're punk rock deadheads. And I'm like, man, do you guys know such and such? And they're like, yeah, man, I'm going to meet him right now. And it was my buddy Sprocket, who was the guy that gave me the 1-900 Run Dead card that I went on tour with, that I had lost touch with because I went to Vegas and got strung out. I've seen him one time since then, and that was at the Dead shows in May 1993 in Vegas. They came and found me on the strip, took me to the shows, and had a good time, and then went on their way, and I stayed to do more meth.
What was the first age? I might have missed it. What was the first age you ever tried anything?
6 years old.
All right. Wow.
I smoked pot and drank beer for the first time at 6.
Who gave it to you?
My older brother, Billy.
All right. Did you like it at first?
Yeah, I did. I didn't really, here's the thing. I never liked drinking, ever. Never liked it. Like, it's not something that like if I ever looked at it in my head, was like, oh man, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I liked the social aspect of it, like going to shows and having a few drinks, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? But like,
yeah,
drinking just for the sake of drinking, like, I have never in my life had a beer because I'm thirsty. Never, not once. Like, I would literally rather go thirsty than just drink a beer by itself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I hated alcohol. And but I still drank. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm probably just as much of an alcoholic as I am an addict, or at least I was when I was in high school. I drank like a fish. We hung out in Salt Lake because their bus broke down, and they're waiting for this mechanic to see if he could fix it. And after about a month, 5-6 weeks, he finally said, no, there's nothing I could do. And it was parked in the old Greyhound parking lot. And finally, I guess they had talked to the mechanic and was like, told the mechanic, like, hey, you need to let us know as soon as this bus can be moved. So the mechanic contacted them, and like, we came back one night, there was a notice on the bus that said you have like 3 days to vacate the president's premises, and the bus is going to be towed. So Sprocket was like, fuck it, man. He's like, we go hang out at my girlfriend's house in Denver, Colorado. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. So me, Sprocket, I think his name was Matt, other kid that came with us. We hitchhiked across Wyoming and then down to Denver, Colorado. Got to Denver on Christmas Eve, 1993. And his girlfriend's mom was like, you're fucking crazy. There ain't no way these are staying in our house. So we ended up going to this teen homeless shelter. And I don't know, man, I didn't really mess around with anything hardcore. I stayed with the hippie drugs. I really got into acid on Dead Tour. So like 93, 94, I ate a lot of acid, smoked a lot of pot. got into like ecstasy and stuff like that. But I stayed away from the hard stuff until December of '94. I was in Oakland for the Grateful Dead shows, and somebody blew a quarter gram of raw crystal LSD in my face. So that's a gram of LSD is enough to make 100 sheets, which is 10,000 hits, right? So a quarter gram is the equivalent of 2,500 hits. Somebody
And by
blew it.
blowing it in someone's face, it can get them intoxicated.
Oh my God, bro. LSD absorbs in skin.
Okay.
So it got in my eyes, it got in my skin, it got in my mouth, like it got in my hair. Like within seconds, I was peaking. I was like higher than I'd ever been in my life. And this went on for days, man. I mean, days, like where like I was going, like I would pass out because my body would just be exhausted, and I'd wake up just as high as I went to sleep. And finally, one of my friends, whose nickname was Junkie Donnie,
Huh.
my nickname on tour was Shades. And so he was like, hey, Shades, he was like, man, he's like, I know that you don't really want to hear this. He's like, but heroin will bring you down. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. I was like, let's go. And we went, got some. And the first time I got high, after years of not getting high, I fell out of a second-story window.
No shit.
I was so high, I nodded right out the window. And I fucking hit an awning and then hit the ground. And like everybody up in the apartment is like looking out the window. They're like, dude, are you all right? I'm like, I think so. Like, I think I'm
So
all
the
right.
awning broke your fall.
Yeah, totally bounced and launched me to the edge of the sidewalk. Which I wish it was a cell phone error, because somebody probably would have got it. But and I was off to the races from December of '94 until September of '96. I probably went no more than a total of 2 or 3 days ever without. Around February, March of '95, I started selling for I'm not going to get too much detail, but a gang that worked for the Mexican mafia that worked for the cartel. In Boulder, I was selling about 3/4 pounds of heroin and 3/4 pounds of cocaine every 3 days.
Wow.
I had the University of Colorado strung the fuck out. And CU Boulder was strung out. I had all those dudes, all the kids strung out on cocaine. But yeah, it wasn't me though. Like I had people who sold for me. Nobody knew it was mine. I was just some other homeless junkie that everybody thought. Like I used to go buy heroin for the people who sold it from me, just to keep up with this. And I ended up getting busted in '96, September of '96. I weighed 143 pounds. I was doing about 3.5 to 5 grams of heroin a day. I was doing about a half ounce of cocaine a day intravenously. I ate 100 milligrams of Valium, 10 milligram Valiums every morning just to get out of bed. And I got busted. And I had 27 federal indictments, including the RICO Act for trafficking controlled substances, Schedule 1, Schedule 2 controlled substances across multiple state lines. Turns out they had a tracker on my car, and they had all the payphones around my house bugged, and or tapped, not bugged, but tapped. And they were listening to all my phone calls. They saw everywhere I went. And then I drove to, this is before DIA, Denver International Airport. There used to be an airport out here called Stapleton. They followed me to Stapleton, watched me get on a plane to California, because I used to fly out to California, pick up the heroin and bring it back. And yeah, dude, it was bad. And I beat that on a technicality. The house that I owned, when I bought it, I put it in an ex-girlfriend's grandma's name, who was suffering from dementia in the state hospital in Pueblo, Colorado. So when they served the warrant on the home, residence, or dwelling owned by me, and I didn't own it. So I beat it on a technicality. Everybody got free except for me. They said when they busted me, they found 1/10 of a gram of heroin in my pocket, which I know was insane, because I literally did half-gram shots. There was like no way I had that little tiny piece of heroin in my pocket. But that was September of 96. From September of 96, or actually I got out after a month, and I was out for a couple months, and then I got busted again in November of 96 for sales. I sold to a friend of mine who volunteered to wear a wire because I was so strung out, and like I wasn't just like I couldn't sell enough drugs to support my habit. So I was, after being at Boulder for a couple of years and being a known Grateful Dead head and having good LSD to sell, I had a lot of high ticket clientele, and I just started ripping them all off. I just started selling bunk acid. I was jacking everybody. I was jacking anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 a day. I had people flying in from around the country to buy my fake acid. And so my friend, he went to the police and he said, "Hey, I got a $20 bill that you can take a photocopy of, and I'll go buy a 20 off of Shades." He's like, "Because I'm afraid that somebody's going to kill him." And I got busted in November. I ended up going to prison for the first time from November of 96 until November of 2005. I was free for a total of about 8 months. So over a 10 years.
What years again? What years?
November 96 to November 2005.
So you were only free for 8 months out of those years.
Yep.
Wow.
And if I was free, I was homeless. I was homeless and I was strung out, or I was living in some weekly pay by the week motel that parole put me up in. And I'd go to prison, get healthy, get out, get strung out, go back, get healthy, get out, get strung out. In 2001, on one of those brief periods out, I shared a needle with a homeless punk rock chick in Denver, and I contracted HIV. So I'm a 21-year survivor of HIV as well. But November of 2005, I got out, and within 2 weeks, I was strung out. I was living 9 blocks away from the parole office on an ankle monitor. I couldn't go more than 100 yards from my house during certain hours, but my front door where my ankle monitor box was at was exactly 98 yards from the front door of the liquor store across the street. So I would walk and I lived with a bunch of teenagers, none of them who were old enough to buy alcohol, and barely any of them were old enough to buy cigarettes at the time when you had to be 18. But I was partying with these teenagers every night on parole, on an ankle monitor. And then on my 32nd birthday, I woke up in a house full of kids, empty beer bottles, bongs, empty bags, cocaine on the table, fucking needles laying around. And I realized if I didn't stop, I was going to die. So I went to my parole officer, and he got me into a program. And while I was sitting at detox, waiting for my bed in the program,
what did you tell your parole officer?
Well, so
Huh.
here's how good I was. Okay, so I got out and I started doing dope. And when I do heroin, I'm a drug-induced bulimic. I puke a lot. So when I get strung out, I lose weight fast. So I decided that I was going to pretend that I had cancer, and that it was going to be cancer of the stomach, and that's why I couldn't hold stuff down. And back then, the place where I did UAs, well, they just sold these drinks, and if you drank this drink and then drank like 2 liters of water and peed one time before you went and did your UA, it would come back clean, and it would have all the nutrients and everything that they looked for, the enzymes and stuff that they look for in the pee to make sure it's not fake, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing that. So I was passing all my UAs, and I had all these doctor's notes that I was fucking making on the computer at the library. And so when I went to my parole officer, I said, "Hey man, I've been lying to you for 2 months." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm strung out." He starts laughing. He pulls out all of my UAs. He's like, "You haven't had a hot UA?" I said, "Come on, man." I said, "I've been in the system since 1989. I said, I know how to beat a UA." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I pulled up my hoodie sleeve and I showed him my tracks. And he was like, "Oh my God." He was like, "Oh my God." He's like, "What am I supposed to do?" I was like, "Well, I want to get in a program." He's like, "Oh." He's like, "Good." So he had me go across the street to the halfway house. There's a halfway house right across the street from the parole office, and do a UA right then. They did the quick test, the dipstick test, came back hot for THC, methamphetamines, because I was doing ecstasy at the time, opiates, and cocaine. And he was like, all right, I need you to go back to your house and not leave your house until I can find you a bed. And I was like, all right, cool. He's like, I understand you have to get well. He's like, but let your girlfriend go. Don't you go. You just go stay home. I said, okay. That night, 2 other parole officers who were the ones who do the random house checks in the middle of the night decided to come check my house. And I'm fucking sitting in my bedroom. My girlfriend at the time and I are having a fight, and everybody who came to our house knew not to ring the doorbell because it rang right over my bed. And I had gone to Denver and not gotten any dough for her. I told her, I said, fuck you. You got this dude who wants to fuck you, who deliver, call him. So I'm just about to do my shot. Got it all fixed up and the doorbell rings. So I do my shot real quick, put the cap on, throw it in the sharps container, throw the sharps container under the table. Under my bed. And then I walked to the front door, and our front door had one of those little doors that you can open up to see who's out there.
Okay.
So I like open up the little door, and I'm like, man, don't ring up. And it's 2 parole officers. There's 2 badges right there. And they're like, do not close that door, unlock the door, take 2 steps back. So I'm like, fuck. So I do it. They open the door. They come in. They're like, who else is in the house? I was like, my girlfriend's in the bathroom plucking her eyebrows. So they go get her, fucking make us sit in chairs. And dude, first they try to go into my roommate's room, but she's smart. She's got a lock and a deadbolt. She sells weed and all her shit's in there. And they're like, we need access to this room. I said, no, you don't. It's the homeowner's. My room is the one in the back. So they go in the back, and he comes back with this grocery bag, and it's got a fucking dirty spoon, a couple dirty needles, a couple dirty wrappers. Opens up the fucking fridge. There's bottles of liquor, cans of beer, and so I was like, you need to call Officer Stern. And they're like, why? I was like, because he understands. I was like, I just told him all of this today. And they're like, you're going to jail. And the one dude's being a dick. And the other one calls my parole officer. My parole officer shows up. And he was like, stop, blah, blah, blah. He takes the bag of stuff. And he was like, Mr. Toll came to me today, get complete admission. He's like, I told him to come home, stay home, not to leave the house, blah, blah, blah. He ran the whole thing down, called the supervisor. The supervisor tells him, he comes back and he's like, it's 7:00 right now. He was like, you have till 9 p.m. to get to the detox in Boulder. He's like, if you're not there, I'm coming to pick you up with a squad car. I was like, bet. It's like a 45-minute bus ride away. I just went, packed a bag, boom, going. Here's the thing though, they never opened up my backpack. My backpack had a bunch of bags of weed in it, some more dope, because I fucking was selling weed to support my habit. So I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I just need to get off parole. Well, an amazing thing happened when I was in the detox. I met a bunch of sober people. They used to have, there was the Friday night young people's meeting that was actually in the detox. And then there was a couple other meetings that were in the rooms upstairs above the detox. And before I even went to treatment, I had this really solid, I went to treatment already on my 4-step. And I did my first 4-step in a 2-week treatment program, and stayed sober for 5 years. It was all about AA and 12-step recovery. But something was wrong. Like I was living a lie. Like they say in 12-step recovery that work with the people who have what you want, right? So I didn't know what I wanted, because like like I never had a life to get back. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you hear in recovery, like, oh, I'm so glad I got my life back, and da, 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 you know what I mean? Like I never really had that. I never had an emotional identity, a spiritual identity. I never had any of that. And so I was trying to pretend to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I ended up starting my own business and meeting this woman and getting married for totally the wrong reasons. We got married to combine our taxes. We ended up buying a house together, and she cheated on me. We got divorced, and I ended up relapsing after 6 years. I say I was sober for 5 years, because the last year I was in a relapse without using. Like I was addictive behavior. She cheated on me, and once she cheated on me, that was like license for me to fuck everybody.
Yeah.
And
Prelapse is a bad thing.
yes, prelapse. I've never heard that before. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And I ended up relapsing like a week or two before my 6-year anniversary, and it wasn't too bad. It was bad. It was bad. What I meant by too bad though was I wasn't committing any crimes or anything because I had a bunch of savings. So I told myself, oh, I'm just going to relapse for a couple of weeks and then go back to the rooms. I just need to get my head straight. Well, it turned into a year and a half, and about 2 weeks before the start of my last relapse, I smoked DMT for the first time. And I had always been afraid of DMT because people are like, man, DMT changes you. It reveals yourself to you. Right. So
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to smoke that shit. Like, I don't want, you know what I mean? I'm totally okay. Like with who I am, I don't need to go any deeper. And well, that changed, after doing all that. Cause like, honestly, man, like when I was in prison for all those years, I actually worked on myself. I read like tons of spiritual and religious self-help books, educated myself, did a bunch of correspondence courses, became a minister. Like, you know what I mean? Like I saw it as my time to like, okay, I'm here for punishment, so I should better myself. I shouldn't be one of those dudes here learning how to be a better criminal. I should be learning how to be a better human being. And so I smoked DMT for the first time, and it changed something. I relapsed a couple weeks later for the last time, and for the first time in 27 years, when I did heroin, it didn't work. Like I got high, don't get me wrong, but it didn't shut up the voices in my head. So now, this piece of shit in my mind, I'm this piece of shit who doesn't even have the escape anymore. Like heroin was the one thing who never betrayed me. I call heroin a she. And she was the one person, anything who had never betrayed me my entire life. Every time I did that drug, it had the effect I wanted it to have till now. So over the next couple weeks, next couple months, I became incredibly miserable. I saw myself in this cycle because when I ran out of money, I pawned some stuff. And it was some stuff that I had bought online a few years earlier. Well, it turns out this bicycle was stolen. And they said with my criminal record that I had no knowledge. There's no way I could have had no knowledge that it wasn't stolen. So they gave me 9 years probation.
Oh,
and yeah. And I made it about 6 months. And I started to really, for the first time in my life, consider putting an end to my life. And I made the decision about 2 weeks before the event. I was just waiting for the right. I had decided that I was going to go to this one friend of mine's house who was also one of my dealers. But I had known him since the mid 90s. Like we were old friends. We just both happened to do heroin. And if it was snowy and cold out, he would let me crash for a night or two. And he'd let me take a shower or a bath. I think he wanted to have sex with me, but he's never forward or nothing. So it snowed this night in October. It's October 27th, and 2013. I was 39 years old, and I went over his house and I bought some dope. And I said, hey, I just hit a lick. I said, I want to buy a couple grams so that I can make some money, sell it and make some money. He said, all right. Because at that point I was only doing like a quarter gram every 3 or 4 days. Like I was barely doing enough to get high. And we watched the movie, and there was another couple who were friends of ours who were spending the night. And we watched the movie, and then we were getting ready to watch the sequel. And I was like, hey, is it all right if I go upstairs and take a bath? And they were like, yeah, man, no worries. I went upstairs, I ran a bath, lit some candles, put on the Velvet Underground, and fixed up 2 grams of heroin and 2 needles, laid in the bathtub, shot them both, and don't remember anything after that. I remember fading out to the sound of Lou Reed and the song Heroin by the Velvet Underground. Next thing I remember, was laying on the bathroom floor in a puddle of water with two dudes over top of me and a chick. She had come upstairs and needed to use the bathroom, so she picked a lock and sat down on the toilet and was talking to me. And when she asked me enough questions and I hadn't responded, she pulled the curtain back and saw that I was blue.
Oh,
and
wow.
pulled me out of the tub. The two guys pulled me out of the tub. We were doing CPR, and she ran downstairs and fixed up a $20 shot of meth, came upstairs and injected me, and they gave me CPR until the meth made it through my system enough to wake me up. And the next day, this is about 11:30 at night, 12, October 27th. And the next day, after laying there feeling like a complete fucking failure, like I'd never felt in my life, something had changed. I knew I never wanted to do heroin again. And I knew that AA, 12-step recovery, wasn't the way for me this time. I knew I had to do something different. I needed something more. Like I feel like I know now that I think I've evolved outside of 12-step. There's a book called Beyond the 12 Steps you should check out. It's really good. It's written by a woman who was in her 80s, who wrote it like was sober for like 40 years. And like at the end of her 40 years of sobriety, she finally figured it out. Wrote a book about it, really good. So I went and I turned myself in because I was on the run from probation. And I told my parole officer, I said, hey, is there any way I can go to detox first? Because I swore I'd never be dope sick in jail again. And she was like, yeah, no problem. I went to detox and then I went to jail. I got into a therapeutic community, which is like a rehab inside of jail, with a bunch of older men, older than me, a bunch of hard-ass convicts that I respected. And at any given time in our men's group, there'd be anywhere from 7 to a dozen of us sitting around crying. Like these men in this jail classrooms taught me how to cry. And they taught me that it's okay for a man to cry. They taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that leading with your vulnerability and leading with your weakness is actually a technique in boxing. You lead with your weakness so that you can follow with your strength. And they helped me to understand that it's how I tell my story to myself first and foremost is how I present myself to the world. So for almost 30 years, I saw myself as a victim who life was happening to. And during this year in this jail with this group of men, I learned that I'm not a victim of anything, that I was a victim to the abuse during that time. But there's nothing about the events that happened in my past that can ever hurt me again unless I allow them to. So what I did was I sat with my trauma and I sat with my demons because I had been so afraid to look at my trauma and to face and grieve from my childhood that I use the analogy when I work with guys and stuff that my trauma was like the monster in the closet. The longer I sat in bed and the longer I sat with my addiction and avoided the trauma, the bigger and meaner that shadowy monster in the closet got. And what happens? Eventually the kid will get up, turn on the light, or he'll call his parents and turn the light on. And you realize that it's not a monster at all. It's just a coat hanging on a hook. Well, when I was finally brave enough to sit with my trauma and to sit with my demons and cast the light on them, I saw it for what it was. An unfortunate series of events that happened to a child who had no control over the situation and had absolutely no responsibility in it. And once I was
that must have taken a lot of strength to do that.
I'll be honest, man, if I wasn't in jail, I don't think I'd have got it done. I probably would have got high. I don't think that I would have been able to do that not outside of jail. It was hard. There was weeks at a time where I didn't get out of bed except to go to mandatory classes, where I would just lay in bed and cry. And even when I was in group, I would cry silently. And then I came to a place where I was able to forgive my stepmom, able to forgive my dad, able to forgive myself, able to forgive my rapists, all my abusers. And I learned what forgiveness is. Forgiveness isn't saying, oh, you're good, whatever you did was okay, it's all good now. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is saying, hey, I'm no longer going to fucking lose sleep over the shit that you did to me. Like, I'm taking my power back. I'm taking control of my life back. And I'm now completely indifferent to you. What you did was fucked up, but that's between you and God. It's got nothing to do with me anymore. That's what forgiveness is to me. And since I was able to find that forgiveness, I ended up going to the halfway house. I was supposed to go to prison. So I had 9 years probation, or 5 years. That's what it was. 5 years probation with a mandatory 9 years suspended prison sentence if I fucked probation. And I did. So I was sitting in county that whole time thinking that I was going back to prison. Well, turns out that 2 DAs in 2 counties and my 2 lawyers in 2 counties were working behind the scenes to get me into a halfway house instead of prison. And out here they call it direct sentence. You get directly sentenced to the halfway house. It's like there's probation, halfway house, prison. It's basically how it works. It's like a glorified work release. And I did great, man. I was there for 6 months. I fucking flew through the program, made it to non-residential where I had my own apartment. A cop, I was on my way to pay my restitution payment for the month, and I jaywalked, and a cop gave me a ticket for jaywalking. And I told him, I said, bro, I said, if you give me this ticket, I was like, I'm going to prison. And the cop was like, well, you shouldn't have jaywalked. And I ended up, because a ticket is a new case, I caught a new case while I was in the halfway house. That's automatic grounds for termination. So I spent the next 3.5 years in prison. So the first 4.5 years of my recovery was spent in prison, or in jail or halfway house or somewhere. And it was amazing. It was when I got to one prison, and it was cool. And then I went to a lower security one, and then I got in a fight that wasn't my fault. It was some dude trying to make a name for himself, and the person that he was trying to oppress didn't like me, so he fucking swung on me on the prison yard, like literally 10 feet away from a cop. So they're like, you didn't do nothing wrong, but we're going to move you to another prison. And they ended up sending me to this prison that's a medical facility. And I ended up becoming, and it's called an OCA, an offender care aid. And you're basically like a nurse, a CNN, a certified nurse, CNA. And I was working with these guys who had life sentences, who had dementia, had no idea who they were, would throw shit at you, try to bite you when you were shaving their face. And then this one client I had, he was a repeat offender pedophile, who, when they caught him the last time, he had kidnapped and murdered a 6-year-old boy. And when they finally caught him, he had the little boy's penis in his wallet. Like, that's how much of a piece of shit this guy was. And in prison, you don't get to pick who your clients are. You don't get to say, oh, I don't want to work with this guy. I don't want to work with this guy. You do that, you're going to the hole. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose all your privileges. You're just going to make life hard for yourself. So I decided that I was going to show these men compassion and love, no matter what they had done, because what they had done was between them and God. It wasn't for me to judge. Like, the dude was he was so fat and had diabetes so bad that he was my client. I watched him cut off each one of his toes, his foot, his shin, and then his whole left leg. You know what I mean? I had to put him on a lift to get him out of his bed into his wheelchair to get into the chow hall. But what it did is it taught me humility. It taught me that no one is better than anyone else. I saw this meme the other day. It said, one dude was like, man, if you had one day left to live, what would you do? And the one person was like, well, man, I used to say I'd go get high and get crazy and parties. And then I thought about it. He's like, Jesus knew, and he washed feet. You know what I'm saying? And that's the kind of humility I want to keep in my life today. I work with newcomers. I'm a life coach now. I'm a certified trauma debriefer. I host a podcast, a weekly podcast called No Love, The Memoir Continues with Rex and Raina. Raina's my wife. I just started last month going into high schools doing drug and alcohol awareness and prevention. I'm a energy healer, Reiki and Ho'oponopono master. And I just bought 20 acres down in southern Colorado that starting this summer, we're going to turn into a homestead. So my life is great today, man. I have no complaints. All of my problems are luxury first world problems. I bitch about the price of gas today. That's my complaint. Now I just try to have a message of positivity, you know what I mean? And enlightenment and hope, and like you and I talked about, like recovery comes in many forms, in many ways. I have a lot of friends who, if it wasn't for methadone or Suboxone, wouldn't have the wonderful life that they have today. I'm a medicinal plant advocate myself, like you said. I'm all for marijuana, other kind of psychedelics, but I don't push that on nobody. You know what I mean? Everybody does their own thing. Everybody has their right to do their own thing. I just want people to understand that they don't have to live that life anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? You don't live that life anymore.
Yeah. No, hell no. It was just, and another thing is, I've said this before, addiction is a lonely place to be.
Oh yeah. That's why they say the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah, this is true.
This is us right here. You know what I mean? Like we're connected. You know what I mean? Like you and I are helping each other stay sober by spreading our story to the world.
Exactly.
And I totally understand the tenets of anonymity. Don't get me wrong. I was when I was in AA for 5 years, I was about it. I held district, regional positions. I had a service sponsor at all times. I, did the steps, the concepts, the traditions. I was all about it because I wanted to know it like I knew heroin.
Yeah.
If I gave my life to heroin, so I was all about it. Well, now I'm giving my life to recovery. I want to be all about it.
Yep.
But I also did a lot of research on the old timers, and Bill Wilson never saw Alcoholics Anonymous as a destination. He saw it as a starting point for life. Like, not saying that like people should stop going to meetings, but like somewhere along the way, it became about, you got to do this or you're going to die. It's this way or no way. And the whole anonymity thing, I get it, because back when Alcoholics Anonymous started, it was prohibition. You know what I mean? They were supposed to be drinking anyway. Like it was totally illegal to be drinking. So they had to keep it anonymous. But like today, with the internet and with the ability to podcast and like TikTok, I've been on TikTok for like 2 weeks, man. And there's a huge recovery community on TikTok and Instagram. I don't know, man. Like I'm all about recovering out loud today. I didn't give a fuck who saw me high. I didn't care. I wore wife beaters in the summer with blood running down my arms because I just done a shot. I didn't care. You know what I mean? So why would I want to hide what recovery's doing for me? I didn't hide what heroin did to me. Why would I want to hide what recovery's doing for me? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So I appreciate you, man. I love having the opportunity to tell my story. I hope, I try not to leave out any of the really horrible stuff, because there might be somebody else out there sitting on something even more horrible. Like, oh, I can't ever talk about that. And they hear me talk about getting fucked in the ass at 13 years old. Or, I joke with some of my buddies. I'm like, I could give better head by 9 years old than most women. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I can joke about it today.
You put some levity to the situation.
Exactly. Like I'm hoping that like my candidness and my vulnerability will allow somebody else to be vulnerable and allow somebody else, and like, hey, me too,
Yeah. So last thing, There's actually, I have two last things.
All right.
What is some advice you would have for people listening or watching?
I guess if you're new, like I try to get messages to newcomers. If you're new, there's 5 things that I did those first 5 years that kept me sober, and they never changed. And I do them today. I don't do it to the extent that I did then, but that's, go to meetings, get a sponsor, get a book, whatever book it is for whatever program you are, and read it with your sponsor. Get a service position and pray. And like, pray doesn't mean you have to get down on your knees and, oh, our Father, blah, blah. It doesn't mean that. It means being open to a dialogue with something positive, because I know that heroin was my God for 27 years. I was a devout worshiper. I was at the altar every single opportunity I had, or I was giving my time for the time that I had spent.
Yeah.
And so for myself, I would advise, don't let the word God in the rooms get you caught up. God can mean anything. It can mean group of drunks, group of drug addicts, great outdoors, good orderly direction. It doesn't have to be some old dude with a white beard sitting on a throne in the sky casting judgment on you.
Yeah.
You just have something positive in your life that you can put your attention and your focus onto, other than the drugs.
Yeah.
That would be my piece of advice.
Awesome. And the second last thing, tell us a little bit more about your podcast real quick.
Yeah. It's called No Love, KNOW, love. And it's a continuation of my book. I wrote a book. It's called No Love, a memoir. Basically the story I just told you. I tried to write it like an AA meeting, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And after writing it and promoting it on social media and going on podcasts and stuff, some people encouraged me that maybe I should do a podcast. So I did, and I just named it after the book. We talk about subjects that are raised, and what I just talked about, sexual trauma, childhood neglect, recovery, addiction, trauma healing. We don't really have a format. It's kind of like you and I just did, me and my wife. It's called No Love, the memoir continues, with Rex and Raina. And we just have guests on, or sometimes it would just be her and I, like our first episode. And then we had another episode, I think it's like episode 6, where the first episode, we just, introduced ourselves and told our story, why we're doing it. And the other one is, my wife is a member of Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, that recovery program.
Okay.
And she's kind of new to it. So she was asking me questions on the podcast, like a newcomer would ask, somebody with 8.5 years, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like you said, like, what advice do you have for newcomers? What did you do in early recovery, and how important is a sponsor, but then other than that, we just have guests on. We've had some really good guests. It's like this, it runs anywhere. They average from about 40 minutes to, I think our longest one was 120. No, not 120. Sorry. I mean, 82 minutes, I think, is the longest one. Yeah. Like an hour and 20 minutes.
Gotcha.
But yeah, man, it's fun. We just have people on, and, I introduce myself. She introduces herself. I introduce them, and kind of like you, I'm like, hey, tell us a little bit about yourself, or tell the audience about yourself. And then we just look for a topic in there, when they're done telling their story, we just ask some questions like you did. Very similar format.
Yeah. Cool. I hope people check it out.
We also, we video it and we put it up on YouTube as well.
How do they find you there?
No Love, the memoir continues on YouTube.
Easy to find.
And then all the social media on Instagram, it's No Love, the memoir continues. And then on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, it's Rex Shades Eagle.
Rex Shades Eagle.
Yep, capital S, capital E, all one word, Shades Eagle.
All right. So I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure to be of service.
Yeah, thank you. So for everyone watching and listening, If you like what you heard and saw, please click subscribe below so you can see when we add new videos. Also, give us a like. Check us out on Instagram, Reddit, Twitter. We also have a Facebook group where you can go there, get some resources, as well as going to the events tab. You can see that we do nightly Zoom meetings. Also, check out our new website, addicts-anonymous.com. There's plenty of resources there, as well as some literature that we have produced. So that's all I have for today. And until next time.